Robin Williams built a career out of sounding like he had just dropped in from somewhere far outside the normal room. He did not glide onto a stage like a polished heir to anything. He burst in. You probably picture him as the ultimate outsider, a man who improvised his way through life and belonged at the absolute edges of the world rather than the center of it. You think you know exactly who he was because his public image felt so complete, so fast, and so emotionally raw. But you are missing the hidden architecture of his entire life. If you only look at his wild screen persona, you are completely blind to one of the most startling family trees in American entertainment. The man who became famous for comic chaos actually came from a background anchored in old American power, massive industrial wealth, and Southern political dynasties. You lose the real story if you believe he just spun out of thin air. By looking at the actual name on his birth certificate, you unlock a hidden American story that makes every character he ever played look completely different. On the birth certificate, his full legal name was Robin McLaurin Williams. That middle name was never a decorative choice or a random family whim. Families use names as quiet weapons against forgetting. Usually, a maternal surname completely vanishes when a daughter marries and has children. The public tends to follow the father's surname at the end, letting the mother's rich history slip away into the background. Robin's family flatly refused to let that happen. They took his mother's maiden name and locked it into the dead center of his identity to keep that specific lineage visible to the world. Every single time an official document called him Robin McLaurin Williams, the family was forcing an older, powerful line to stay alive in the modern era. They chose to write their history right into his life before he had ever spoken a single word. His mother was Lori McLaurin Janin Williams. She was a former model born in Mississippi. Through her bloodline, Robin stood in direct descent from a man named Anselm J. McLaurin. This ancestor was not a minor local figure or a forgotten low-level bureaucrat. Anselm J. McLaurin served as a highly powerful governor and a United States Senator in Mississippi. He lived from 1848 to 1909, operating at the absolute highest levels of regional authority long before Robin was born. When you find a governor and a senator sitting in a family tree, that kind of history carries massive weight and prestige. It carries the heavy echo of rank, public dominance, and old regional standing. The records show a clean, documented chain linking a 20th century performer directly back to a 19th century political boss. You expect a child born into that kind of legacy to grow up carefully managing his image, speaking with perfect control, and stepping naturally into a life of public command. The family clearly valued that old power enough to purposefully preserve the McLaurin name across the generations. But the political dynasty only tells half the story. His father, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, brought an entirely different kind of authority into the household. Robert originally came from Indiana and worked his way up to become a highly successful executive for the Ford Motor Company. This specific detail places Robin right inside the massive industrial and managerial order of mid-century America. This branch of the family did not drift at the financial edges of national life. They were directly connected to one of the most powerful industrial corporations in the entire country. The father's career required strict structure, corporate mobility, and a firm grip on modern business success. Robin Williams grew up surrounded by the absolute peak of American corporate power and managerial authority. That immense corporate success completely shaped the physical world of his childhood. Because fame always exaggerates the truth, a popular myth eventually claimed he grew up in a cartoonish 30-room mansion. The actual historical records and Robin's own memory correct that fake precision, but the truth remains incredibly striking. He actually spent his early years living in a large rented estate located in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. He remembered the physical space clearly as a giant, beautiful old mansion. This elite suburban environment reflected serious industrial wealth and extreme distance from ordinary financial struggles. He walked the halls of a stately, imposing home built by his father's corporate world. He was physically raised inside a setting that demanded formality and projected massive status. If you dig even deeper into the background, the family tree widens into a massive web of European migration. Beyond the Mississippi politicians and the Midwestern executives, genealogists mapped out English, German, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh ancestry. The historical records also reveal broad French ancestry located on his mother's side. People love to exaggerate this specific detail and try to turn Robin Williams into the direct heir of a flashy French aristocrat. The actual documents support a broader, more realistic French heritage without relying on a theatrical noble title. This rich mix forms a deeply layered American collage of movement. His family did not just drop out of the sky, they represented centuries of travel, intermarriage, and established Atlantic coast routes. He stood at the exact crossing point where all of these powerful historical lines finally met in one single person. He carried the formal name of a governor and the financial backing of a Ford executive. By all traditional rules of pedigree, he should have become a polished lawyer, a corporate manager, or a politician. He should have walked into a room and projected the finished, quiet confidence of a man born to inherit the world. He did not do that. He took that heavy, structured background and completely walked away from it. His actual life kept moving elsewhere. He rooted his physical life in mid-century Chicago, the Michigan suburbs, and eventually the performance spaces of California. Those distinct geographic places asked different things from a person and rewarded entirely different human instincts. He traded the executive boardrooms and the political parlors for stages, studios, and film sets. He aggressively escaped the settled definition of his own lineage. While the old governor provided the formal family history, Robin found his actual creative engine much closer to home. He did not look backward at the dead politician for guidance on how to live his life. Instead, he pointed directly to his mother, Lori. He openly credited her with actively shaping his razor-sharp sense of humor. The McLaurin name preserved the formal history on a piece of paper, but Lori gave him the living, breathing influence he actually used every single day. She handed him his rhythm, his comic timing, and his wild emotional energy. The formal ancestor survived purely in language, but his mother survived in his laughter. He used her wit to completely reinvent himself. When he finally stepped onto the screen, he built a public identity that directly contradicted every single piece of his elite ancestry. He did not perform power, he performed vulnerability. He became famous for inhabiting characters who felt entirely unstable in deeply human ways. Critics constantly noted his unique gift for playing eccentric, wounded, and misfit characters. He brought to life souls who seemed too open, too bruised, or too unusual for the normal order of the world. In iconic roles like the Fisher King and Good Will Hunting, he did not embody social ease or inherited confidence. He embodied pure feeling, emotional damage, and a brilliant difference. He made eccentricity feel incredibly tender and managed to make the complete misfit the most important person in the room. A family can hand down a name, money, and social access, but it cannot hand down the kind of empathy Robin Williams possessed. Empathy is the most revealing word in his entire story. When he performed, he constantly reached out toward the bruised, broken parts of people rather than looking away from them. He did not stand high above the outsiders. He seemed to understand them intimately from the inside. A massive star usually becomes a symbol of glamorous distance or towering triumph. Robin Williams became a symbol of radical recognition. People looked at him and felt completely understood. They saw a man who recognized the awkward person, the lonely person, and the person desperately trying to use jokes as a heavy suit of armor. That emotional position is the exact opposite of old political prestige. Prestige demands that you already belong at the dead center of the room. Robin gave his best work to the people who were terrified they might never belong anywhere at all. His mind operated at an incredibly fast, almost dangerous speed. He became the absolute master of improvisation. Improvisation is the ultimate rejection of an inherited script. It requires a person to throw away the careful plans and live entirely by emotional reflex and creative nerve in front of a live audience. When Robin Williams improvised, he did not look like a careful man delivering a polished family message. He looked like a man aggressively outrunning every fixed identity in sight. He felt delightfully unstable, as if his mind could crack open at any second and let 5 completely new people rush out into the world. He broke every single rule that his structured background suggested he should follow. He turned himself into strangers, oddballs, and voices that seemed to arrive from the absolute edge of the earth. The massive gap between his pedigree and his performance is what makes his life so deeply fascinating. On one side of the scale, you have a Ford executive father, a Mississippi governor, great-grandfather, and a giant rented mansion in Bloomfield Hills. You have extreme structure, status, European migration, and undeniable privilege. On the other side of the scale, you have a man who built an immortal career playing people who were completely off the map. He took all that inherited certainty and threw it away to become a chaotic, brilliant force of nature. The public never saw the elite networks standing quietly behind him. They only saw a performer who made the lonely and the awkward feel fully human. You think you know a famous person because you have watched them on a movie screen for decades. You assume their public face is the entire truth of their existence. But Robin Williams proves how completely wrong that assumption can be. He was born into a highly structured world of corporate executives and Southern politicians, carrying a specific name that linked him directly to the highest levels of American power. The history was undeniably real, and the family made sure it survived by writing it onto his birth certificate. But he completely refused to let that old history dictate his soul. He took the heavy inheritance of the establishment and used his life to honor the misfits, the dreamers, and the wounded geniuses. He did not carry Mississippi power onto the screen. He carried restless comic energy, deep empathy, and massive emotional risk. He became famous not for looking like the center of old authority, but for making people on the edges feel fully human. He held the map to the very center of the American elite, but he chose to walk right off the edge of it instead.